Shadows of the Holy Night. Chapter 1: The Arrival of Darkness. The city, dressed in its festive best, sparkled like a treasure chest as Christmas approached. Glittering lights lined the streets, a towering Christmas tree stood proud in the square, and the air was filled with laughter, greetings, and the warm aroma of baked goods and mulled wine. Luke, a young man working at one of the Christmas market stalls, was part of this bustling scene. He sold handcrafted wooden ornaments from a small stand, but in his heart, he couldn't help but feel a little estranged from the holiday cheer. For him, Christmas wasn't a season of joy. It was a time that painfully reminded him of what he had lost. That night, after the market had closed, Luke stayed behind to tidy up. The hour was already late, well past 11, and the once crowded square had emptied. The festive lights still twinkled, but the silence felt eerie, almost oppressive. A biting cold wind swept through the square, prompting Luke to tighten his scarf as he worked. Out of the corner of his eye, something strange caught his attention. A shadow, faint but distinctly unnatural, shifted across the cobblestones under the glow of the Christmas lights. It wasn't an ordinary shadow. Its form was fluid, constantly shifting as if it were alive. "What is that?" Luke froze, his gaze fixed on the shadow as it glided toward the center of the square. As he focused on it, the shadow began to take on an unsettling humanoid shape. Moments later, dozens of elongated, distorted hands seemed to emerge from within its darkness. A chill ran down his spine. Luke wanted to move, to run, but his feet were rooted to the ground as if frozen by fear. The shadow crept closer, and just as it reached him, a low, guttural whisper slithered into his ears. "Lost memories, mine to take." The voice was faint yet piercing, carried on the cold wind like a haunting melody. Luke's breath hitched as the shadow drew even nearer, until a sudden tolling of bells shattered the silence. Gong! Gong! The sound echoed across the square, deep and resonant. The shadow recoiled instantly, its form wavering and retreating as though frightened by the chime. It slithered backward, dissolving into the surrounding darkness until it was gone entirely. Luke remained standing in the square, his body trembling. His heart pounded as he strained to catch his breath, the faint sound of the bells still lingering in the air. He scanned the area, but it was completely deserted. The source of the tolling was a mystery. What was that? A sense of déjà vu tugged at him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. He felt as though he had encountered that shadow before. Shaking his head, he hurriedly packed up his stall and left the square, but the sensation of being watched never left him, not even as he disappeared into the cold, quiet night. Chapter 2: The Bells of Forgetting. The next morning, Luke woke up with a heavy head and dark circles under his eyes. The strange events of the previous night felt like a dream, yet he couldn't shake the certainty that it had been real. The shadow, the tolling of the bells, and those chilling words, "lost memories, mine to take," echoed relentlessly in his mind. Returning to the square that day, Luke tried to focus on his work. The Christmas market was bustling with cheerful shoppers, and the festive atmosphere was a sharp contrast to the unease that gnawed at his thoughts. The warmth of the day's activities almost succeeded in dulling his anxiety, but as night fell and the lights of the market twinkled back to life, that familiar dread began to creep back into his chest. What was that thing? He muttered to himself, staring into his cup of coffee at a cafe near the square. As he gazed into the swirling steam, a presence caught his attention. An old woman stood at the cafe's entrance, her piercing eyes fixed directly on him. Her gaze was intense, almost as though she were peering into his very soul. "You saw the shadow, didn't you?" she said in a quiet but firm voice as she approached. Luke's heart skipped a beat. Her words struck him with such precision that he couldn't bring himself to brush her off. There was something unshakably knowing in her tone, something he felt compelled to listen to. How do you know that?" he stammered. "I can see it," the woman replied as she settled into the seat across from him. "Those who are touched by the shadow bear a mark. Most people can't see it, but I can." Luke instinctively touched his face, though he felt nothing unusual. The woman, however, seemed certain. "That shadow feeds on memories," she continued. "It appears every Christmas, drawn to the light and joy of this season. The happier the memories, the stronger it becomes." "Memories? What are you talking about?" Luke asked, leaning forward. The old woman sighed, her eyes glinting with a mix of weariness and urgency. "That shadow is what remains of the Keeper of Forgetting, a being once bound to this city's bell tower. Long ago, the Keeper was entrusted with the task of guarding forgotten memories. But when the tower fell into ruin and its bells fell silent, the Keeper lost its purpose. It became the shadow you saw." Luke's thoughts snapped to the tolling bells from the night before. He had thought the sound had banished the shadow, but now he wondered if the bells and the shadow were somehow connected. But why me? Why did it come after me? The old woman hesitated for a moment, her expression softening. "Because you, too, have lost memories," she said finally. "The shadow can sense them and wants to take them for itself." Luke's heart raced. The thought unsettled him, lost memories. A sharp pang stabbed at his chest as he struggled to recall something, anything, that might explain the woman's claim. But every time he tried, his mind hit a foggy wall, as if the memories in question had been sealed away. The woman reached into her pocket and handed him a small piece of paper. It was a simple map, drawn with shaky but deliberate lines, marking the location of the city's old bell tower. "Tonight, you need to go there," she said. "If you want to reclaim what's yours, the truth lies in that tower." Before Luke could respond, the woman rose and left, disappearing into the crowd outside. He sat in silence, staring at the map in his hand. His pulse quickened as he realized that the bell tower, abandoned and forgotten by the city, held answers he hadn't even known he was seeking. "Tonight," Luke whispered to himself, his resolve hardening. As the festive lights of the square flickered on around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the night ahead would be unlike any he had ever known. Chapter 3: The Whispering Bell Tower. Night fell, and the city grew colder, the air sharp with frost. Luke stood before the old bell tower, clutching the map the woman had given him. The tower loomed silently at the edge of the city, its presence forgotten by nearly everyone. Its rusty, iron-bound door seemed to whisper of stories long buried. "This is it," Luke murmured, taking a deep breath. "The place where my memories might be." He pushed the heavy door open. A long, metallic creak echoed into the night, the sound cutting through the stillness like a knife. The air inside was damp and frigid, carrying the scent of dust and decay. Using a flashlight, Luke stepped cautiously into the darkness. The interior was as decrepit as he'd imagined. Crumbling stone steps spiraled upward, and cobwebs clung to the walls like forgotten promises. As Luke moved further in, the cold seemed to deepen, and an eerie silence enveloped him. Then, faintly at first, he heard a sound, soft whispers, rising and falling like distant wind. "Do you wish to remember?" The disembodied voice made Luke freeze. His flashlight wavered, casting distorted shadows against the walls. He spun around, but nothing was there. The whispers grew louder. "Your lost memories, they are here." "Who's there?" Luke shouted, his voice echoing back at him. But only the whispers answered, blending into the sound of his quickening breath. Following the voice, he climbed the crumbling staircase, each step groaning under his weight. At the top of the tower, he found a massive bell, its surface darkened with rust and age. Beneath it sat a small altar etched with strange patterns. Atop the altar, a flickering lantern glowed faintly. "What is this?" Luke muttered, stepping closer. The moment his hand hovered near the lantern, shadows began to seep from the cracks in the walls. They coalesced into a familiar, formless entity, the shadow he had seen in the square. "You came." The shadow's voice was both hollow and vast, filling the room. "You seek what was taken." Luke stepped back, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. "If you have my memories, give them back." The shadow didn't respond immediately. Instead, it shifted and expanded, its darkness pressing in on Luke from all sides. Then, its voice returned, low and haunting. "To take them back, you must open the door." "What door?" Luke demanded. The shadow raised a tendril-like arm, pointing toward the bell. Luke hesitated, staring at the enormous object. Dangling from a cord tied around the bell's clapper was a small key, worn and tarnished. "That key unlocks the truth," the shadow whispered. "But the truth carries a price." Ignoring the fear knotting in his chest, Luke approached the bell. His fingers brushed against the cold metal as he reached for the key. The moment he untied it, the entire tower began to tremble. Gong! Gong! The deep toll of the bell reverberated through the air, louder than any sound he had ever heard. Luke fell to his knees, clutching the key as the vibration rattled his bones. Images began to flash before his eyes, memories he hadn't realized were missing. In his mind, he saw himself as a child, wandering into this very bell tower on a snowy Christmas night. He had been drawn to the bell, just as he was now. In the memory, His small hands clutched a glowing lantern as he discovered a key tied to the bell. But then, something had happened. A shadow had emerged, its presence overwhelming and suffocating. "You were here before," the shadow said, its voice cutting through the memory. "You took the key, and you sealed your own fate." Luke gasped as the memory faded, leaving him trembling. "That was me. You freed me," the shadow continued, its form looming closer. "But in doing so, you gave me your most precious memories. Now, you've returned to reclaim what was lost." Luke tightened his grip on the key, his fear giving way to determination. "I won't let you keep them." The shadow quivered, its shape shifting chaotically. Then opened the door and faced the truth. With the key in hand, Luke looked around. At the base of the bell tower, just visible through the flickering light of his flashlight, was a small, iron door set into the wall. Its surface was inscribed with the same strange patterns as the altar. The whispers grew louder as he approached. "This is the door," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He slid the key into the lock, and as it turned, the whispers stopped. The door creaked open to reveal a staircase descending into darkness. A wave of icy air rushed out, and Luke hesitated only a moment before stepping through. Chapter 4: The Forgotten Door. The trembling of the bell tower subsided, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Luke stood still, clutching the cold, tarnished key in his hand. The shadow's ominous words echoed in his mind, "That key unlocks the truth." He turned his flashlight back toward the iron door he had glimpsed at the base of the bell tower. It was small, half buried in the crumbling stone wall, as if deliberately hidden. Its surface was weathered and covered in strange, intricate carvings that seemed to shift under the flickering light. "This must be it," Luke murmured. He hesitated. The air around the door was cold, biting at his skin even more sharply than the winter outside. But his resolve outweighed his fear. He slid the key into the rusted lock. It resisted at first, as though it hadn't been turned in centuries, but with a sharp click, the lock gave way. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of icy wind that carried the faint sound of whispers. Luke shivered but stepped through, his flashlight's beam piercing the darkness beyond. The narrow staircase spiraled downward, the damp air growing colder with each step. The walls were lined with a strange, glimmering frost that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. Luke's breath fogged in the air, and the sound of his footsteps echoed endlessly, amplifying the eerie stillness. At the bottom of the staircase, he emerged into a vast, shadowy chamber. In the center of the room floated a massive, circular mirror, its surface rippling like water. The mirror's ornate frame was carved with the same symbols as the door, and it emanated an otherworldly light. "What is this place?" Luke whispered, his voice swallowed by the cold, hollow air. The shadow's form materialized behind him, stretching across the chamber and enveloping the mirror. Its voice was deeper now, resonating from all directions. "This is the mirror of memories, the gateway to what you've lost." Luke took a step closer, drawn to the shimmering surface. His reflection wavered as if the mirror were alive, and faint images began to appear within it. At first, they were unclear: a snowy street, a child's laughter, the warmth of a family gathered around a Christmas tree. Then, they sharpened into a single scene. In the mirror, Luke saw himself as a child, standing in this very chamber. Snowflakes clung to his hair as he held a small lantern in one hand and the same key in the other. He was gazing into the mirror, just as he was now. "That's me," Luke said, his voice barely audible. The memory began to play out like a scene from a long-forgotten story. The young Luke reached toward the mirror, and as his hand touched its surface, a shadow erupted from within, enveloping him in darkness. His small body collapsed to the ground, and the shadow absorbed his light, his laughter, his joy. "You gave your memories to seal me within this place," the shadow hissed. But the seal was imperfect. "When the bell tower fell into disrepair, I was freed to wander the city." Luke felt a sharp pang in his chest as more memories surged forward. He saw himself growing up, haunted by an inexplicable emptiness. The faces of loved ones were blurred in his mind, their names forgotten. The shadow had taken everything, leaving him a hollow shell. "I want them back," Luke said through clenched teeth. "All of them." The shadow quivered, its form distorting as it circled him. "To reclaim your memories, you must pay the price." "What price?" "You must open the final door and accept what lies beyond." The shadow extended a tendril toward the mirror, and a new vision appeared. It showed another door, hidden deeper within the chamber. This door was different. Its surface glowed faintly, as though it were alive. "Beyond that door lies the truth you seek," the shadow said. "But the truth will bind you. Are you prepared to face it?" Luke's hands trembled, the cold key digging into his palm. He stared at the glowing door, his heart pounding. He had come this far, and though fear gripped him, he knew there was no turning back. "I'm not afraid," he said, his voice steady. "I'll face whatever's behind that door." The shadow retreated into the darkness, its form rippling like smoke. "Then go. But know this: once the truth is revealed, you can never undo it." Luke approached the glowing door, his footsteps echoing against the chamber's icy floor. The symbols on its surface shimmered as he drew near, and the whispers that had followed him grew louder. With a deep breath, he inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open, releasing a blinding light that engulfed him. Chapter 5: The Truth of Forgetting. The light from the door engulfed Luke, its intensity blinding him as he stepped forward. For a moment, it felt as though he were suspended in nothingness, weightless, timeless, and utterly alone. Then, the world began to take shape around him. He found himself in a strange, otherworldly space. The ground beneath him was smooth and reflective, like glass, while the air shimmered with faint, golden light. In the center of this space floated a pedestal, atop which rested a glowing crystal orb. It pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, as though alive. "This is it," Luke whispered, his voice echoing faintly in the void. He approached the orb cautiously, its glow intensifying with each step. Before he could reach it, the shadow materialized again, its enormous form enveloping the space. It was larger and more oppressive than ever, its presence suffocating. "You have arrived at the heart of your memories," the shadow intoned. "The orb contains what was lost, but reclaiming it comes with a price." Luke clenched his fists. "You keep saying that. What price? What do you want from me?" The shadow quivered, its form rippling as it loomed closer. "To restore your memories, you must give yourself to me. I am bound to this place, chained by the memories I consume. If you take back what is yours, I will be freed, but you will take my place." Luke's breath caught in his throat. The weight of the shadow's words sank into him, heavy and cold. To regain his past, his family, and his lost joy, he would have to sacrifice himself. "Become the keeper of forgetting," the shadow continued. "Or leave and remain hollow." Luke stared at the orb, its light almost hypnotic. He could feel the memories within it, warm and familiar, like a home he hadn't visited in years. The faces of loved ones, the sound of their laughter, the joy of Christmas mornings, all of it called to him, pulling at his heart. "I've lived without my memories for so long," he said, his voice trembling. "But I can't keep running from what I've lost." The shadow shifted, its tendrils circling Luke. Then sighed. Luke stepped closer to the orb, his resolve hardening. He reached out, his fingertips brushing its surface. The moment he touched it, the orb flared with brilliant light, and his mind was flooded with memories. The forgotten past. He saw himself as a child, wandering into the bell tower on a snowy Christmas night. The tower had called to him, its ancient magic awakening something within him. He had found the shadow trapped within the mirror and, out of fear and desperation, had used the key to seal it. But the seal had come at a cost. The shadow had taken his most precious memories, his family, his happiness, his very sense of self, and bound them within the orb. The child Luke had stumbled out of the tower, empty and confused, his memories buried deep within this place. Tears streamed down Luke's face as the memories continued to pour into him. He saw the warmth of his parents' smiles, the comfort of his childhood home, the joy of opening presents under the Christmas tree. He felt the pain of their absence, the loneliness that had followed him all these years. "I can't lose this again," he said, his voice breaking. "I won't." The shadow roared, its form writhing violently as the orb's light grew brighter. "You cannot take back what was given without paying the price." Luke stood firm, gripping the orb tightly. "If I have to give myself up to set things right, then so be it." The light from the orb exploded outward, consuming both Luke and the shadow. The oppressive darkness dissolved, and Luke felt a strange calm wash over him. He was no longer afraid. When the light faded, Luke found himself lying on the floor of the bell tower. The cold air bit at his skin, but he felt a warmth inside, a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He sat up slowly, realizing that the shadow was gone. In his hand was a small, clear shard of the orb, glowing faintly. The bell tower was quiet, save for the faint sound of bells tolling in the distance. Outside, Outside, snow was falling softly, blanketing the city in a serene glow. Luke stepped out into the night, breathing in the crisp air. His memories had returned, and with them, the weight of his past. But he was free now, free from the shadow, free from the emptiness that had haunted him. The shard in his hand pulsed gently, a reminder of what he had overcome. "This is my Christmas miracle," Luke said quietly, looking up at the star-filled sky. He smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like an eternity.